Hi everyone, thank you for being here. We're taping this, so if you have any friends who can't be here and are interested in this topic, they can look it up on the website. Speaking of which, there was a presentation, I don't know if all of you participated in or have watched the most recent First Friday Forum. Terrific presentation on more of the science of monitoring when wildfires are emerging. So why am I here talking to you? So I'm a longtime member also of LOPC. I had a 40+ year career in financial services, and part of that career I spent monitoring the risk in our loan portfolio at a bank I worked at, including looking at all the different kinds of hazards, earthquake, wildfire, floods, you name it. We hired companies who did modeling for us, and then I monitored the insurance that we had on our loan portfolio. So it's always been something of interest to me. I live here in Lafayette in a high fire risk area. My insurance has been canceled 3 times. So yeah, I have some strong personal interest in this. I retired 2 years ago and joined the Lafayette Emergency Preparedness Council, a commission. The city of Lafayette, and John is a city council member, so if he were here, he'd be speaking about this, but the city has priorities every year. So the city council meets, determines their top priorities for the year. For the city of Lafayette, the last several years, wildfire preparedness for the community has been a top priority. And responsibility for that cascades down through our Emergency Preparedness Commission. And there are 7 members of our commission, lots of different backgrounds from fire experience to community experience, etc. But we have a lot of priorities, one of which is community education like this, and helping communities. We'll talk about Firewise, it's program, national program. Many of you probably live in Firewise neighborhoods already. Evacuation is a big theme for this year, and I know that we all saw the tragedies that happened in Southern California earlier this year, so I know it's very top of mind for everyone. So what are we going to talk about today? We're going to talk about defining the risk in our area, preparing your property and your home, preparing to evacuate, and some of the tools that you can use to be notified of when that may be a thing to do. We'll spend a couple minutes on property insurance and some of the differences of how the insurance companies are looking at mapping, and then Q&A. But as I said, if you have a question as we go along, just let me know. So this is a triangle that you see a lot in wildfire discussions. There are 3 major contributors to wildfire risk: weather, topography, and fuel. So we can't do anything about the weather, and it's become more pronounced that we have risk because of our dry climate over the last 10 or 20 years. Topography, we have a lot of hills and a lot of green space around us. And then fuel, things that can burn. And that is something where we can take some action. We'll talk about that too. So wildfire is a very large and growing risk in the Lamorinda area. All of California, but particularly Lamorinda. CAL FIRE maintains fire maps. I'm sure all of you have been reading about the new fire maps that came out earlier this year. We're going to talk about those. I'll show you the map for our area. Historically, CAL FIRE just think of it as black and white. You were very high or you were nothing. That's it. So I lived in a very high fire neighborhood. Many of you probably did as well. They came out with new maps that are much more refined this year. Think of it as shades of gray. So very high, high, moderate, and no risk. There's never a no risk, but that's how they grade it. So in some of our areas, it resulted, for me in particular, we were in a very high risk area under the black and white. Now we're just high. So honestly, you shouldn't read that as your risk is less. Just read it as it's a little bit more refined than it was before. Across the Lamorinda area, we do have a very high concentration of very high and high fire risk areas. And a lot of that is because of the development that has happened over the last 60 or 70 years in what's called the wildland urban interface, or the WUI. So you can look around, see Briones, East Bay Mud Properties, and there, I have coyotes and mountain lions and things that wander into my yard. That is wildland interface. And then a contributing factor to the growing risk is that we're having hotter and drier conditions throughout more of the year. And I'm sure you've all seen this little dial thing that's in our communities telling us when the fire risk is high, typically in the latter half of the year. A friend of mine who lives in Orinda up on Zander Drive, this is a picture of Zander Drive in the 1960s. And then the other picture is, it's not Zander, but it's a local community picture. And there's some really key differences that make the wildfire risk greater for our neighborhoods. You can see there are not many homes here, lots of homes today. And look at the plants here. Around the home, there's a bunch of scrub, just natural scrub, and you see a lot of oak trees in the distance, but look how much all of it has grown up over the last 60 some odd years. So that is a big contributing factor to wildfire risk for our area. This is the map, the most recent map that was, so the black boundary here, that's Lafayette, and then you can see Orinda and Moraga on the periphery. One of the biggest changes in this new map that just came out is that a whole bunch of Lafayette north of Highway 24 used to be red. Red is very high risk, orange is high risk, and yellow is moderate risk. So that was a big change, and I'll be honest, some people in my neighborhood, you know, they kind of think it's a conspiracy theory, which is, I don't think it is, but it is a change. But a lot of Lafayette is orange and yellow, and huge amounts of Orinda. So if you look at the red here, and so any guesses on what the big contributing factor is to why Orinda's is so much redder?
The plants, and I noticed, I was thinking about this about a month ago as I was driving on the road looking up in Orinda. Just, the homes are just surrounded by a lot of high brush and high trees.
Mm-hmm. And in particular, lots of eucalyptus trees. The farther you get over to this side of the map and the closer you get to the Oakland Hills. So Oakland Hills themselves are much, much bigger risk. If you listen to the First Friday Forum, it became very clear why the Oakland Hills are such a big risk. But also along that perimeter, there are a lot of very hazardous plants, including eucalyptus. So obviously big risk for our area, and that's why it's such an important priority for the city. Okay, so a conversation I have on a regular basis is, well, how different is wildfire risk from just a house fire? And the answer is they're massively different. So this is a picture of a typical house fire. This is a picture of a wildfire. So it's a much larger footprint than a typical residential fire. The fire and police department resources will be stretched tremendously in the event. And one of the major things that has to occur, you cannot send fire personnel into harm's way. So if you're sending them into situations where there's a high probability that they could be injured or killed, the fire department is not going to do that. And that is often the case in wildfires where you see those very large boundaries. Those end up being events where they really need to fight the fire from the air. And that was the case with the Altadena fire and the Pacific Palisades fires, that they needed to fight them from the fire, but they were having wind gusts of up to 90 miles an hour. They're not going to put aircraft up either. So in those situations, it's easy to say, well, wow, nobody's doing anything. But the realistic answer to that is there may be a period of time when there's not much that can be done because it's impossible to fight it safely. Water infrastructure, there was a lot of discussion about fire hydrants, and their lack of capacity in Pacific Palisades. That is also to be expected. Fire hydrants are put there for residential fires, one or two. It can put out that house fire, but if you open up all of the fire hydrants at the same time, there is not enough water pressure in the world to be able to fight a wildfire with the water from fire hydrants. The Emergency Preparedness Commission had East Bay Mud come in and do a presentation to us at our last commission meeting. Fantastic. They sent their head of operations, And I walked away from it just feeling a lot more comfortable with knowing what East Bay Med is doing. They do a fantastic job of maintaining a fire hydrant network that we can rely upon, but it's not reliable for wildfires. It's great for home fires. So, okay, next. Okay, so what do we do about it? It's obviously a high-risk situation. There are a number of things you can do. So many of you have probably heard about the concept of defensible space. So think of your home as the center of this, and you cascade out from there in different circles, and those are defensible space zones. So zone 0, how many of you have heard of zone 0? It's like, if you live in Moraga and Orinda, you've heard of zone 0 for sure. So zone 0 is the 5 feet from the edge of your house. So go to the wall of your house, 5 feet out, that's zone 0. That's what we hear the most about. That's where the belief is you can have a lot of impact on the fire risk for your home, your property. Different communities are handling this differently, and the state is making changes now to requirements around zone 0. We will see something on that by the end of the year. The idea is if you live in a very high, red fire district, that you may have to remove all flammable materials from zone 0. So that's all plants, because all plants will burn, all flammable materials like fencing. So if you have, like I do, I have a wooden fence that attaches to my house, measure 5 feet out, take the wood out. You can put metal fencing, but wood is not going to be allowed there. So this is all in the comment period, so it hasn't been fully adopted yet, but it looks like the state is headed in that direction for very high fire risk neighborhoods. The other issue though is insurance companies, and I think that where most of us are going to see the zone 0 come into effect is you will have your insurance company say, I'm not going to insure you unless you are zone 0 compliant. They can do whatever they want. So that is where I'm expecting to see most impact of that in the near future. Zone 1 is 5 to 30 feet out, and then zone 2 is 30 to 100 feet out from your home. So for those, we'll talk a little bit more about some of the things you can do there, but making it lean, removing flammable dead plants, and just taking burnable fuels out of that, those are the strategies that you can use in those zones. So key steps there, removing things. Clearing combustible items such as leaves from your yard, dead branches, piles of debris. Very critical is keeping your gutters clear, particularly later in the year as we get towards fire season. Any embers that land on your home, and there are embers that they've measured 15, 16 miles that embers can fly, land on your house. So if there's a fire anywhere in the area, embers could land on your roof. Keeping your gutters clear is imperative. Reducing things such as lower limbs of trees, go up 6 feet, make sure the space underneath the trees are clear, getting dead wood out, and of course, weed abatement, deadline's coming up. I think it's May 31st or June 1st, depending on which community you're in. Getting your weeds down to 3 inches or less. And then replacing things. So plants, there are some plants, all plants will burn. Agaves will burn given enough heat and fire, but there are some plants that are much more prone to burning than others. And so replacing some of your plants, like my next door neighbor's house burned to the ground 15 years ago. And the pine trees that were on their property, they've been there for 60 years. They were planted when the homes all went in Lamorinda. Those big pines that have been dying, bark beetle things, they look like torches, all of them across their property, which abutted mine, and all the embers came down into our yard and set our pine trees. All those pine trees are now gone. So anything that didn't burn in that fire, we took them out. They are highly flammable, and they send debris everywhere. Eucalyptus, if you have eucalyptus, that would be the very first thing I'd take out of my yard. Highly flammable, and because they have all the, bark that comes off and it flies everywhere, so from an ember standpoint, again, something really dangerous. Ignition resistant building materials for your roof is the number one thing. Your insurance company, I'm sure, is asking you if you have a Class A roof. That means it's tile or stone or a composite material that is not flammable. So new homes that are being built, so there's a brand new home being built down the street from my house, and I asked the developer the other day, I said, what are you building it with? And they're building it with non-flammable paneling, wally board that they're putting in there. So stucco's great, all kinds of surfaces. If I had to redo my house right now, that would be one of the things I would do. It's expensive, but over time it's something you should be thinking about. And vents. So a lot of us have the vents that go up into your roof and your eaves and your lower parts of your house. Replacing the mesh with what's called micro mesh, so it has smaller openings, like 1/8 inch openings instead of bigger ones that might have been in place when your house was built. Those are all things that we can do. What else? So do any of you live in a Firewise neighborhood? Awesome, that's great. Okay, so I live in a Firewise neighborhood. I'm the Firewise representative. I took it over from someone a couple of years ago. It's a national program that brings communities together to take steps to make their community safer. So it's a huge priority of the Lafayette Commission, the Emergency Preparedness Commission, to promote expansion of Firewise in Lafayette. So Lafayette has 24 existing Firewise neighborhoods now. Moraga and Orinda, they're structured under, they have what's called the Moraga-Orinda Firewise Network, and those two cities together have something like 30 Firewise neighborhoods as well. So there are a lot of resources. If you don't, Laura, live in one yet, so I'm working with Laura to create a Firewise neighborhood. There's a whole group of people in Burton Valley looking to do that. And if you're in Moraga-Orinda, the Firewise Network can help you. If you're in Lafayette, I can help you get started. We have a lot of tools for you. The community around Firewise is really building awareness and just having a methodical way to work together as your neighborhood community to reduce risk. So what do you get out of it? There are a lot of benefits to it. One that became very important for me this year is you can get an insurance discount. So if you're on the California Fair Plan, it's a 10% policy discount. So those are super expensive policies, so it's real money. You get preferred access to resources from the fire district. So Measure X funding that has gone into the fire districts around us. You get, if you're a Firewise community, you go to the top of the list for getting things like they'll come in and do a chipping day. We just had one in my neighborhood where they'll come in, everybody can stack all the stuff they want chipped at the curb. They come in and chip it and take it away for free. It's terrific. By sharing information with each other, you make better decisions, and it's just an opportunity to collaborate with your neighbors. What else? Okay, evacuation. So there are a lot of things you can do. We had a good conversation with some of the folks who arrived early today about things that you can do to be aware if it's a deteriorating situation and you might need to evacuate. So getting registered for alerts. And there are a variety of them. There's a lot of information sitting out on the tables here, but the community warning system, enrolling in that and making sure that you set it so that it goes off if you're asleep. So my phone goes on do not disturb at 10 o'clock and wakes up at 7. But I have my children, and the community warning system can get to me 24/7. So Nixle alerts are similar, but those are community alerts. So it could be traffic is stopped on Pleasant Hill Road, but they will also use the Nixle alerts as a notification mechanism if there's wildfire. There is an app called Genesis Protect, and they will give you emergency notifications as well. It is the system that is behind the community warning system. But it is an app that you can go on and proactively look at where the evacuation zones are. You should know your evacuation zone, and I'll show you how to do that in a minute. There's also an app called Pulse Point. where you can receive notifications of local emergencies of all types. It can be other types of emergencies, not just wildfire. And then there is a community radio station. Let's say there's a wildfire, there's one of those PG&E PSPSs, and you don't have power and your internet's down. You can turn on this AM radio station. It covers all of the Lamorinda area, and they will, if you turn into it now, it basically says, this is an emergency radio station and nothing's happening. But if it were happening, this is where you'd go for information. So it's a good resource to know about in case something happens. Evacuation zones. So if you go to Genesis Protect, that website, you can put your address into the search and it will tell you what your evacuation zone is. So I am in that green one, that's me. That's Lafayette Zone 3. And it's a good thing to know in the event of an emergency. If the Contra Costa Fire comes out or Lafayette-Orinda Fire says, we are evacuating Lafayette Zones 2, 3, and 4. They're also going to use landmarks. They're not just going to tell you that. They're going to say everything to the west of Happy Valley Road, right? They'll use landmarks as well, but it's handy to know because it's a shortcut to give you a sense of when to get out. What else? Okay, preparing your go bag. I'm sure you've all heard of go bags. It is really good practice to put that together. Even if you don't have every single thing in your go bag, I learned some really valuable lessons when my next door neighbor's house burned down. We live on a private road, and the house below us on another street was the one that burned down. And my husband was, eager to get us to evacuate, and I was trying to take a methodical approach, thinking what to take. He's like, let's go, and I'm like, I don't know what to take. So I made a list. After that, I now have an evacuation list. So I have a go bag, but there are things that are not always in the go bag. So if you just have a list right next to your go bag, you can pick those things up really quickly and get out. It's great to have a plan with your family. All of us have different kinds of family structures, but what if your kids are in school? Or what if your husband or wife is at the grocery store? Like, where are you going to meet? You may not be able to get back into your home. So where are you going to meet if something happens? You may have neighbors who need help. So I had a neighbor with mobility issues, and when we had to evacuate, our first step once we got our cars out of the driveway was to make sure they knew they needed to get out and that they could. This can be something that evolves over time. So I think about my good friend Carolyn, who can't drive right now. So if Carolyn had to evacuate and Michael wasn't home for some reason, your worst case scenario is call the police and tell them. So the police is responsible for getting people out. The fire district is responsible for fighting the fire. So really, really important, do not stay and try to defend your home. Just don't. A wildfire is gonna beat you every time. Get out. I really think the ideal time to get prepared to evacuate is when red flag warnings. That's the first sign you're gonna see, is the community's gonna say it's a red flag warning. If it then gets worse and PG&E turns off your power, one of their power shutoffs, I am packing my car and getting ready and to park your car in the driveway and get ready to drive out. The traffic situation is not going to be pretty if we all have to evacuate at the same time. So the best thing you can do is get out and do it early. What else? Okay, property insurance, a quick commentary on property insurance. Cancellations are widespread. Been canceled 3 times. I'm now with the California Fair Plan. My cost has gone up over 4 times over the past 10 years. It's insane. Each insurance company has their own hazard maps. So you can be sitting in Lafayette saying, but I'm in a low risk, there's no risk here, and they can cancel you anyway because they have their own maps and they're gonna do what they wanna do. So some recommendations on how to improve your situation as much as possible. One is to keep your neighborhood and keep your property as clear as possible. Avoiding little tiny claims. Don't tick off your insurance company by making nuisance claims. consider a higher deductible. Like we took the highest deductible on the California Fair Plan because it's really a catastrophic coverage and it will reduce your cost. Claim your Firewise rate reduction if you're in one of those neighborhoods. Create defensible space. Sign up for emergency notifications, create an evacuation plan, Firewise, manage your insurance policies, and advocate with state commissioners. I'll just show you real quick some of the resources that we have sitting over on the table. One is, this is the Lamorinda Wildfire Preparedness Guide. It is the Bible of all you need to know. It was collaboratively done between our 3 communities. It's got an array of tools. One of the tools, talking about evacuation, is if you have evacuated, leave a sign on your front door or your mailbox or whatever saying, I'm out. This is the one my neighborhood uses. It's a plastic thing. So if you're in a Firewise neighborhood, it's a great project to do, to come up with these, but they're also in this fire guide. So this one says, I need help. If you need help, put it on your front door so the police know. But it's really important if you have evacuated to tell the police so they don't have to bother searching your house. But also an array of really valuable information, including how to sign up for alerts. And here, this is a brand new evacuation guide that the Lafayette Police Department just put together. It's got QR codes for the community warning system, etc. And then last but not least, if you are interested in Firewise, there's a flyer. It's got my email on it, and happy to help you with that. So with that, thanks everyone.
Thank you.